So I'd like to focus on 3 different strategies for you to think about this morning. One is that we need to start thinking about sharing our leadership with the people that we have employed with us. The days are gone where you have to be the all-knowing individual. And by talking this morning through the sharing leadership strategy, you'll see how this will engage your A players, and that's what we want to focus on. Your D's and E players, you should not be spending as much time with those people, but you'll find that that's where you in fact are spending your time. So we're going to talk this morning about how do we engage this top talent. Just as an overview for you, I want to talk a little bit about what and how to enrich or enlarge positions. Because at some point you're going to find we just don't have any more money to pay people. Or in nonprofit, we have to find other opportunities to engage those people. And we've got lots for them to do. So you don't just hire a person for a fairly structured position. We want to talk about those A players. How have you identified them, and have you done a good job at telling them that they're A players? Do you communicate with them? Do they know that? Are they actively coming up with ideas of ways to continue the business? And then we want to spend a little bit of time talking about 2 different areas. One is initiative, and then the other is risk-taking. As we work through this morning, I'm going to ask you to think about your organization. So if you're sitting with competitors, then feel free to pass when we're talking about sharing if you don't want to give your secrets away, and just be thinking and comprehending and reflecting yourself. The second type of leadership strategy that I want to talk about is transformational. And I believe Sandy brought up the point about change management. It's there. It happens every single day. Not to the magnitude, but it happens. So therefore, we want to talk about how do we handle transformational leadership. And some ideas that I have found to be successful in my experience is the communication piece. Are you talking openly? Don't feel you have to share every detail when there's change happening. You don't, and nor should you. But you do have to communicate openly to your staff, and we'll talk through that a little bit more. Do they know where your organization's going? Not just what your organization's all about. Why are you in existence? But where do you want to be in a year's time? Are you sharing that information with your staff? Now, sometimes in a year's time, we're not going to have a business. You might think, this business is only going to be in operation for 1 more year. We're going to wind it down. Maybe the people in leadership roles want to retire and there isn't succession planning. But be mindful of that vision and be talking to your employees about that vision. You'll find that if they know where they fit in the organization and what they do to the bottom line, you will get that retention number increasing. It's when they go through an organization that they have no idea of how they fit into the big picture and what effect they have on the bottom line. Even your frontline staff, that receptionist who answers the phone and greets people is a really important individual in your organization. And you need to talk to them about that importance. And you as a leader need to model that vision. Nothing worse than having a vision that there's a disconnect. It's written on the wall that this is what we should be doing, but look at what our leaders do. It's completely different than what's on the wall. So modeling. I find that the younger generation, you have to talk to them a little bit more in detail about what you're expecting. Because maybe they didn't get that education at home. Like some of us that are a little bit older, maybe 27, maybe we got that at home, whereas they're not getting that training right now at home. So you can't assume that they know what you mean. When you say, dress professional, they may not know what that is. So you have to explain that. So we'll talk in that a little bit more detail. And then how to build that commitment or that enthusiasm for that vision. Nothing worse than having 25 employees in your workplace all have a straight face. They're there to put a day in and then leave at the end of the day. No one is thinking about how do we build this business? How do we enjoy ourselves here? It's that motivation and that influence that you're going to find that's going to retain people. And then lastly, how are you recognizing your employees? It does not have to always be for money. The younger generation is very keen to work on some of those non-monetary recognition pieces. So maybe I'll give you some ideas there as to what you might do. And then there's always the managerial side. This is to get the business done. This is where you're analyzing the activities. Should we continue doing work the way we have been? Or is it time to change? Pause once in a while in the positions you've got in your organization and assess. Should we still be doing work this way? Or do we need to think about a better way of doing it? Or stop doing it? What we tend to do to our staff is just keep adding on more work. We never stop and say, stop. Let's have a look. What can come off the plate? What should come off the plate? What are our customers asking us for? And if you're in HR, remember your customers are all internal. It's not just external, it's internal we're going to talk about. Another aspect is about this topic of well-being. What does that mean? And how are you addressing it? What could you do in a little bit more detail? I want to plant a seed with you. A number of people that are coming out of the post-secondary institutions right now are really struggling with finances. They don't know how to budget. They're taught a whole bunch of content when they're at the post-secondary institutions, but they don't know how to start saving, paying off their student loans. Well, maybe you should be having someone come in and have a conversation with those people, a presentation, a lunch and learn about those topics. Never talk to them about this is what you have to do. Just talk about the topics so that you start to plant some seeds with them. Because if they're worried about how am I going to make my payment, they're not thinking about the work that needs to be done that day. Their focus is someplace else. Also with well-being, there's a number of individuals in your organization who may not be as healthy as they should be. And it's thinking about how are we going to cope with that aspect in our workplace. And important is to provide feedback. This is part of the managerial portion of your role. How are you giving feedback, and also how are you asking for feedback? And when people come and tell you you're fantastic, don't just take that. Deep dive. Find out what they like you're doing. Because to tell you you're awesome really helps your ego, but it really doesn't help tell you what you're doing well in your organization that people are resonating with. And will build that retention. Different generations are looking for different things when it comes to feedback and recognition. So that's what we're going to cover in an hour and a half. We ready? Let's just talk first of all about leadership. I used 3 terms that I wanted you to talk about first in your table. I think leadership focuses on these areas: influencing your employees, motivating your employees, and enabling your employees. So have a quick discussion at your table. What do those words mean to you? And how can you show those in your workplace? This is leadership, different than managers. This is leadership. Quick discussion and then we'll talk. Away you go. Let's talk about influence. What does that do? Why does that make you a leader compared to managers who may not focus on the influence piece? What does influence mean? How do you do it in your organizations? Mike. Anyone?
I think influence as a leader is casting that vision and really getting the team on board and, again, communicating that vision and then modeling it. Mm-hmm. So you're sharing your influence by saying, this is where I want to go. This is how we're going to get there. I'm right here in the trenches with you. Mm-hmm. Let's do this together. Mm-hmm.
So the type of people that you would come into the organization and they're always in their office. Ooh, pitched in. You left your work and came over here. We had a deadline at 2 o'clock and you helped us meet it. Just be specific on whatever it is that you're giving them feedback on, because a number of people have expressed to me through the years, I never know what I'm doing right. They give me these thank you cards. They give me these sticky notes with a smiley face, but I still don't really know what I've done right that particular day. Okay? Enable. Ideas on what enabling means. Leaders let others do the work with them as well, so you don't have to do everything yourself. It's bringing those people along. Find out in your staff, who are the ones that are keen to learn something different? Yes, you might have hired them as the receptionist. However, you now need someone who is going to process, maybe not process, but maybe stamp invoices, who knows what. But ask your people if they're ready to learn new tasks. That's, again, another way of engaging them in the workplace. Now, be careful with your timing. If you've got an individual who just started, don't go to them the next day and say, is there something else we can give you to do? Let them get used to their job, get comfortable with it, and then start to ask those questions about other things. In your conversation with people, as you enable them, you may find that someone really doesn't want to work in HR. They'd rather go over to your communications side, or they don't want to be in accounting anymore. So when the opportunity comes, can you consider me for something else? It's building those relationships with people that they feel comfortable talking to whoever their manager is. So these are 3 things we're going to build on today. These are the basis of the leadership strategies that we're going to talk about. Questions? Comments? So I mentioned this in the introduction, is the traditional way of the workplace was to always have the strategy handed down from the top of the mountain, and the rest of the people in the organization just marched along. I wanted to have you entertain the idea and think about other ways that you can share that leadership. Depending on the opportunity that arises, depending on the skill set of the people, this is a way to develop your employees. And it also is an opportunity for you to start doing some cross-training. You never know when an individual may not be coming to work tomorrow because there may have been an injury. Who knows what? They may have resigned. So you want to do some cross-training in your organizations, and this is a way to start doing that. It's sharing the leadership. So provide opportunities for people to learn. I really like what's called lunch and learns. They're brief, they're to the point, and in the organizations I'm in right now, we don't actually provide lunch. People bring their own lunch. Why? Because we've got gluten intolerance. We've got cultural differences. So it's easier for people to bring their own lunch, and then we provide water, juice, coffee, whatever it is. But it's quick ways for people to be educated. And I encourage you to do this in 2 ways. One, in the technical content of their job. The other piece is their soft skills, their social skills. We all can use advice on how to deal with the different generations. Some of you may have 5 different generations in your workplace. Where I spend some time, there are 7, because we've got people that are 14 years old all the way up to 76. And so to try and get those people working together and communicating with each other is a challenge. So we found that by providing some of these opportunities for people to communicate and for the younger people to educate the seniors about how to use technology, so that there was no judgment, you just passed along the knowledge. And so that's a suggestion for a way of leading. Be clear on the expectations. What are you expecting from people? Don't just say, answer the phone. That's not specific enough. You want them to answer it in a certain number of rings. You want them to be pleasant on the phone. Explain what pleasant means. Don't assume that their definition is the same as yours. When you're in the accounting field and you don't want to have any mistakes, tell them that. What is accuracy? Accuracy to some people means 50%. So don't assume that their level of expectation is the same as yours. So spend some time. And then get people involved. Find out what their passion is. What do you like about this job? When you have employees who've been with your organization for a while, I encourage you to do what's called stay interviews. That's asking them, what do you like about the organization? Now be ready for the answer. They might tell you, there's no other jobs around right now, so that's why I'm here. Well, they're being honest with you. But find out what they like about what you're doing. And then continue doing that. Enhance it. When you look at your managers, encourage them to have these conversations with their direct reports to build that rapport. The presidents don't have time to do this, but your managers have to make the time. This is important. The company wouldn't be where it is if the people weren't there. Well, you better start spending some time with those individuals. Some different tips or tricks that you might want to think about is to break down some of these silos that we have in our organization. You're in accounting, you can only work with accounting people. You're in HR, sit in your office and process payroll. You're in supply chain, don't interact with anybody else in the organization. Give opportunities for people to work across functions. It teaches them other things that are going on in the business, but it also shows them how their job impacts the process of what's going on. It helps build that education about the company. Number 2, ask your employees. They're the ones that are doing the jobs. Is there any way we can improve how we do this job? Asking someone's opinion is free. You then have the choice. Do we actually implement their suggestion, or do we come back to them and say, can't use your idea right now, but keep coming up with those ideas? And I encourage you to give opportunities for people to develop themselves. So if a person has come to you and said, I'd really like to be considered for a leadership role, give them a smaller project. Work with them on developing expectations that you've got in your organization for standards, and then see how they do. Provide them feedback, and then give them an opportunity maybe to team lead. So not have performance management responsibilities, but maybe coach people in your organization. So it's coming up with these ideas. It's offering opportunities for people to develop in other areas. These are ways to engage your employees. Now, sometimes when you've got people 60, 65, 70 years old, they don't want to be there in the wintertime. They'd rather be able to take a break in winter. So you might want to think now about who can we get to start training in some of those particular roles so that we have that flexibility for the employees in that age group to head off. Don't just start planning this a week before they go. Now's the opportunity. Other people in the organization will observe the development opportunities and they will be engaged. Their interest in the company will improve because they see you're investing in others. I want to talk about your A players. Right now, think about who's A players in your organization. Who would you really miss if they walked out the door? Do you know who those A players are? Let's give you a minute to think about that. And if you do have A players, you may not. That could be your priority for the year, is we've got to get some top talent in here. But if you do have those A players, why are they A? What are they doing that you like to see? What are they delivering in your organization that helps your bottom line? And whatever that is, start talking to your teams about the expectations that you've got. And then Most importantly, are you telling them they're A players? A lot of leaders in their own mind think that Charlie is an A player, but they never tell Charlie. They keep it a secret. So Charlie doesn't understand that he's valued. So share with your A players and tell them that you're going to start working on a development plan for them. See if they're interested in moving up, moving horizontal, whatever way it works in your particular organization. You'll find that your managers will come to you after spending time with A players and say they feel a whole lot better. Why? Because they actually did something positive that particular day, rather than dealing with those problem employees. We tend to only focus on the problems. We don't spend time in that top level. They know they're doing good. We don't have to tell them that. I challenge you to think a little bit differently about that. Invest in those people. Don't have to spend a lot of time, but it makes you feel better as well. Question I've got at the bottom is, does your employee base mirror your customers? Do you know who your customers are? And do your employees understand what your customers want? Have you asked? Have the customers shared? And think about this in regard to cultural, in regard to generational, in regard to the service levels, whatever it is. Do you have that representation in your particular employee base? Extend an invitation. Ask the opinion of some of your employees on the decisions that are made in your organization. If you do something in your company that is socially responsible, why does that have to sit with the leadership team? Why do you not engage your more junior players in those particular activities? So if you're going to adopt a not-for-profit, you're going to partner with them maybe through the coming year. Why don't you encourage your junior players to engage in those conversations and come up with activities? It's a way of learning that will develop those skills. I want to spend a little bit of time. What happens if I make a mistake in your organization? How is that addressed? Do you tell people right away if they've made a mistake? If so, how is it delivered? And how do you coach so that they don't make the mistake again? One step further, what happens if they make the same mistake again? And what happens if they've made it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times? Are you starting to performance manage them? How you handle mistakes in your organization is important. And this is a skill you might want to spend some time training your managers on, because maybe they're emotional. Don't be so stupid. Geez, I can't trust you to do anything right. Those are very damaging comments that might come out of your managers. And if they've never been trained on how to handle mistakes, you can't expect them to know how to do it. But it's going to happen. Mistakes happen every day. Someone in your organization is going to make a mistake every single day. So you need to figure out, how are we going to start talking about it? And how are we going to learn from those mistakes? That's risk-taking. All right, so any questions about shared leadership? I'd like you to talk at your table for just a couple minutes then. If you went back to your organization right now and you looked at your job, whatever it is that you do, what's one idea that you might consider trying, sharing the leadership with some of your direct reports? If you don't have any direct reports, how might you share your leadership with some of the committees that you're on in your organization? So just have conversation. Get out of the mindset of the president has to know everything. There's talent in your organization. You just have to tap into it. So how are you going to share that leadership? Quick discussion. Give you a couple minutes. Ideas of how you use shared leadership in your organizations right now, or how you might when you go back in an hour's time, in 2 hours' time, the mic is yours. People haven't said anything yet, maybe.
Oh, me.
Yes. Let's have you say something.
So we had talked a bit about volunteer management and knowing what your volunteers come for. Are they there because they want a hands-on job to do? Are they there to give you their opinion and expertise? Or are they just there as a resume builder? So to know what you can commit to out of that. And part of that applies back to staff as well. It's good to know what the motivation is amongst your staff and what level of tasks you can give them and let them have autonomy with, and what ones you need to be watching either as a manager or as the team. It's good for the whole team to be watching for what's happening within the...
Good, thank you. Anybody else?
We're in a trades environment, so we're really good at telling people when they screw up.
Yeah.
That's always the easy part. Something I implemented years ago is taking all of the staff that answer the phones and make sure that anytime you hear a positive customer comment, that gets back to me. So all the attaboys, attagirls come out. We actually were posting them on our website. We make sure it goes back to the employee, and a poster goes up, and in a matter of a few years we had 600 of them. Fantastic. So there's a lot of goodness that's out there, but we often just take that for granted and, and expect it to carry on. So.
Exactly, yeah. Just to build on that a little bit, that's fantastic that you're recognizing when people do things right. Just ensure that they're comfortable with how you're recognizing them. Because I might be really shy. So to come into work one day and see my picture on the wall, at a girl, at a boy, would just devastate me. So ensure that the people that you are recognizing appreciate the type of recognition that you're giving.
To that point, their picture's never up. It's usually a meme of something, so it's a
cool,
entertaining and comedic picture of that. So.
Good. Giving people gift cards is quite common for recognition, but be careful when you're always giving gift cards to a coffee shop because they don't drink coffee. What are you saying to them? You never spent the time to find out what might be of interest to them to recognize. So don't assume just because you go to Tim Hortons 14 times a day that all of your staff does as well. Okay? So shared leadership is important. I encourage you to think about it and think about how you are leading at the workplace. What else could you be doing? And don't feel you have to do everything. The days are busy. Wouldn't you rather spend some quality time than have to do all of those tasks that you're expected to do? It's always of interest to me when I help organizations and look at their job descriptions and they've got 35 tasks for one person. It's not doable. You're not going to get quality if you're giving people all of those tasks to do. So think about what's important, what's not important. Let's get on to change, because this is real and it's happening. And a lot of organizations need to rethink how they're handling change. It's called transformational leadership. And what you want to do is keep up with the trends. So how you handle change in your organization is not to blow up. It's going to happen every day, whether we're ready or not. So let's build some coping mechanisms for what it is that we need to address. Don't just change for the sake of changing. Your competitors are doing something, keep your eye on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do exactly the same that they are doing. Number 2 is really be clear about what the change is and how it's going to impact your people. A number of individuals have gone through reorganizations, and you use the term, we're just going to reorganize. Tell your people, why? Why are we reorganizing? It could be development opportunities for your leadership team. It could be that you're taking on a new product line, and the individual is not familiar with that particular product line. Who knows what the reason is, but be clear with your people as to why you're making the change, and then focus people on that change. Give them time to be frustrated, because they're going to be. I like my job. I don't want to change. You've already got me doing 10 things. Now you're going to have me doing 12. I don't want to work with that person. I'm comfortable here. It's giving people time to process, what's this going to mean to me? The resistance that you see for change quite often is that people have put ideas into their mind about what this change is going to do for them. And have you ever noticed it's always negative? They don't often look at these changes in a positive perspective. So think about clarity when you're looking at the change in your organization. And encourage and talk about what you're expecting your employees to do in this new, bigger picture. I always have found that if employees know the importance that they play in this organization, that it helps them get on board. The retention goes up when you've got that commitment from your employees as to, this is the difference that I make in this organization and what I can do to help. So, communication is important. It's a two-way dialogue. It's not just one way. One organization that I worked with last week is doing a reorganization. You know how some of the staff found out? A spreadsheet came out. And in the spreadsheet had nice little boxes, and it had people under different individuals. That's the first time they found out that there was a reorganization happening. That's not two-way communication. Talk to your staff first and tell them it's happening, tell them why it's happening, give them time to process, and then start working through how this change is going to occur. Encourage cross-team communication as well through change. It's interesting. You've got a plan in place about how you're going to make change. Have you ever noticed that that plan sometimes has to be tweaked, has to be edited, has to be modified? Because what you forgot to think about something else, or it's going to take longer. If you've ever done technology changes, you for sure would have to modify your change plan, because very seldom do those technology changes happen as planned. It takes longer. Training needs to happen. So think about the cross-team and get people talking to each other. And do your employees know how to talk to their leaders? Your younger staff feels insecure about how to talk to the senior management team and the president. They don't know what to say. That's a piece that you're finding in the newer graduates now. They don't have exposure of talking to people at more senior levels. So they don't know what to say and how to say it. So what do? They don't say anything. Hi. So develop that with them. Get talking to them about how to communicate. Be strategic when you have your lunch and learns. Don't have the president always at the front. Have them sitting with a pretty junior player around the table. And then coach that individual about how to have those conversations. The vision. When you are rolling out change, make sure you talk to your employees about a plan. This is how long it's going to take. We may have to tweak this. And then talk to them about, this is where our organization is going. This is going to be the short term, and this is the long term. Now, when I talk about sharing information with your employees, don't give them a 9-page document. They're never going to read it, and it's too much information. 1 page is sufficient. 1 email. And communicate in different ways, because people learn in different ways. So some of your employees will never look at a written document, but if you have a video, they certainly will look at that. If you've got a blog, maybe they will consider engaging in that. Look at different ways to communicate with them. And this is where I'm going with this, how are you sharing? The different generations will expect different things. So communicate in a way that will land well with your employees. And make sure you share that often. You never can over-communicate when you're bringing change into your organization. Just communicating once is not enough. You're going to have to talk more than that. This is where we're talking about the vision of your organization, and are you modeling it? Think about yourself right now, and how do you model your vision to your employees? What do you do on a daily basis? that tells them that you're congruent with where your business is going? How's your behavior giving them an example of how you expect them to connect with you, with customers, and with each other? And work is work, so you've got to be focused on performance. Tell your employees what you're expecting and sit down and have conversation with them more than just once a year about whether they're meeting the goals that you've set or not. And if they're not, get them communicating with you. How can we get you to meet your deadlines? You're missing your deadlines. Got to get them work done on time. What can we do to help you with that? That's that shared leadership. We have an issue here. How are we going to deal with it? We want you to come up with some ideas. And every person in your organization needs to be lined up with that vision. Particularly in not-for-profits, you want to ensure that your employees buy into the vision of your organization. Do they really believe in what you're doing? The worst thing that's going to happen is that you've got people in your organization who don't agree with what your purpose is. When you've got volunteers, do they understand the importance of the volunteer base and what they're doing? And let's start gathering some numbers. This is what metrics is, and I put this in here to lead into our the presentation after the break, is what kind of numbers are you presenting to the senior leadership team? Do you talk about your turnover rate? Do you look at your turnover rate with different levels of your organization? Do you have a turnover problem in the entire organization or just at the junior level? Do you have a turnover rate with your volunteers? Is it one particular committee that you're having this turnover rate problem? And then talk to your employees. In the experience that I've had, I find that the employees really don't know what your business is all about. They know that you ship product, but they have no idea how much. They have no idea what you're trying to meet. We try to ship within 2 hours, 5 hours. Those metrics I encourage you to share with your employees. And then you can have some fun with it when you have your social events. Is ask them a question on a metric that you've shared with them. It builds their financial knowledge. Always be looking at your HR practices and are they congruent with what's happening? We've had an awful lot of change in our laws this year. Our employment standards, occupational health and safety is changing. So with the trades, it's important for you to be looking at that. Are we now following the right acts, the right laws? And we're contemplating still cannabis. How are you dealing with that? What are you going to do with that? How are we going to implement that practice and handle it appropriately? So it's always tweaking those practices. Look at some of your policies. So if you've got an HR individual in your organization, have them look at the policies. Again, try to avoid 10-page policies. Nobody's going to read them. Get them down to 1 page and use language that your employees will understand. Talk to them about what the purpose of the policy is, what's expected, the process, and the last piece is what happens if they don't agree? Is there an appeal process that they can go through? When you have your orientation, do you start it from the day that they sign their offer letter? Do you send them information in the mail to read before they come into your office? Why is it the first thing we do with employees when they come into the workplace is we then have them sit down for 2 hours and read through a policy book and do other payroll papers? Why don't we have them do that ahead of time? Now, maybe I'm not sharing the policy, but why don't you send TD1s to them? They can complete that and send it in to you before they even start. So the first day on the job, they're actually doing something. We spend all this time bringing people into the organization. Then what do? We turn them off the first time they walk through the door because the orientation is taken 2 days, 2 hours, 5 days. Get them doing something that first day. And again, you'll see me talking here about cross-training. I really encourage you to get your different teams breaking out of those silos so that they can talk about, they'll first get comfortable with each other. It's building those relationships, no different than what you expect them to do with the customers. You want them to build relationships with customers? Well, have them start with each other in the workplace. Great ideas come from your employees just talking to each other. You don't have to always come up with the ideas of things to do. They will. Recognition, again, another piece that you might want to spend time on your management team or your leaders is how are we recognizing? How often do we recognize? And do you have a goal for each of your managers to recognize their staff? Is it a measurable goal? Pay attention. If you don't have it as a goal with managers, they're not going to do it because they got too much on their plate. But if you have it as a goal, it's in the back of their mind, then give them skills to be able to develop that. Development opportunities, you can bring external people in, but sometimes you've got the talent within. And that's a great opportunity for your staff to do some training. It builds their confidence and it builds their knowledge of how to talk with people, not talk to people. And this is where the stay interview comes in, is ask them, what do you like that we're doing here? And when you ask open-ended questions, if you've asked them in your organizations before and you find the quality of the answer is not very good, I'd encourage you just to tweak the question. Say, can you suggest one idea? See how you're now asking for a specific number, and they'll come back and give you that one idea. Now, this is all the stuff that needs to get done in a day. We've talked about shared leadership, talked about what you're going to do with change. But in your day-to-day life as the manager of a team, are the daily activities getting performed? Have a look at your overtime numbers. Are people having to spend more time getting work done than what they used to before? Then it's time to pause and say, what's happening with the efficiency? Maybe your individuals aren't skilled enough to do the job you're asking them to do. But stop and have a look at, are the daily activities actually being performed that we are expecting? Assess the well-being of your employees. I just want you again to think about this. How is the physical well-being of the employees in your organization? Because if they're not feeling well, if they're struggling, their performance is not going to be as good as what it used to be. So when you see a change in behavior, that's a time for you to care. Don't become a counselor, but care. Direct them to a source that can certainly help them with whatever it is that they're coming up with. And always give feedback on those performance goals. Charlie, I like that you've achieved this goal, which was have all your reports in 2 days before the due date. You've increased the quality of the reports. I can understand them. You're giving some thought. Well done. And just a comment. Some of you have promoted people into leadership roles because they've been there. You're rewarding tenure. You're not rewarding talent. You've been with the organization 10 years, it's time to move you. You're now going to become a manager. So that's moving people just because of their technical ability. Maybe they don't like people. What have you got them managing people for if they don't like people? They did a great job as an engineer, and I hate to pick on that industry, but they do this quite often. They promote people because they're great engineers. But the engineer themselves doesn't want to have anything to do with people. They like doing the technical piece of the job. When the president comes and says, we want to move you into a manager role, they felt they had to say yes. But when they've been in the role for a while, they say, you know what, this isn't for me. Some skills you might want to look at to see if you've got these in your A player leadership. A-player managers. Do they have a personality? Number 2, do they know the business? Do they have cognitive and practical intelligence? Can they learn? Can you trust their judgment? Do they have a drive to improve the organization? And this is a piece that you're going to have to spend an awful lot of time with younger folks coming through post-secondary, is the self-awareness. I'm allowed to say this at home. Can't I say it here? I'm allowed to dress this way at home. Can't I dress this way here? So when you've got a dress code, don't just say it's business attire. You're going to have to spend some time talking about what business attire means. Because maybe at home I'm allowed to wear my ball cap at the dinner table. Maybe that's not what's allowed in the workplace. And those of you that are in the trade area, make sure you talk to people about, there's no excuse. You need to have whatever equipment that you have to have for this job when you walk on the site, not just when a site foreman is on duty. Emotional intelligence, you better have some HR people and at least one of the leadership team high on emotional intelligence. How do they read the room? How's everybody doing today? And if there's stress in the organization, you might want to bring people together and have conversation. What is causing the stress in that organization? Emotional intelligence is how you can read how people are feeling. And integrity, really important. Honesty. So those are some attributes that you might want to think about. So if you are looking to hire someone in a leadership role, you might want to put some of these requirements on your job posting. Or you might want to ask some questions in the interview about some of these skills. Okay? So that's all the time I wanted to take. Now I want to give you time to do some thinking. So in your package that you received, I believe the first 2 pages, so let me see here.
Would you like to also pull it up on the screen?
Sure, yeah. The first case study, it's asking you to reflect on your own organization. And I want you to assess the leadership strategies, because what we want to do is we want to retain our top talent. So think about one leader in your organization. If you'd like this to be you, by all means, but just one leader, because we don't have all that much time, but I do want you to think about one leader and the team that that leader is responsible for. In this exercise, I want you to think about what your vision is. Don't quote it. I want it in lay terms. What really is the purpose of your organization? And then number 2, what are some behaviors that you expect of the staff in that particular team? How are they supposed to act? Get those 2 pieces there. And then think about those behaviors. Is that in fact what we're wanting in this organization? An example I can give you is I just worked with a sales team and they wanted to bring more revenue in. So their vision includes a piece about bringing revenue into the organization. One behavior that they want to see in their salesmen is that they're out there making the sale. When in fact, they looked at the behaviors they were encouraging is they were encouraging unethical behavior with some of the sales that were being done. So when they stopped to look at those behaviors, they saw, oh wow, look what we're encouraging our staff to do here. We got to change. We got to tell them that we're wanting something different. So that's what those 2 pieces do. What's the purpose of the organization? What's the vision? And then what are we expecting our behaviors to be? And then I've just encouraged you to think about some metrics. What is the turnover rate in that particular team? Obviously, you won't have the exact number, but think about it. How often is there turnover in that team? Remember, 0% turnover is not good. You're not ready if there is a crisis in your organization where someone key in that organization walks out the door. So you want to kind of prepare yourself. And that's why you always want to have at least 2-3% turnover. If you've got 10% turnover, that's all right too. You can manage it. But if you're getting as high as 20%, 50%, an organization I worked with, 95% turnover. So all we were doing was hiring. Yeah, hiring and orienting, and then they were walking out the door.
People leaving, quitting, then you have to find someone.
You got it. You got it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, annual percentage, yeah. So metrics is something that I just want you to think about, and I just picked turnover. There's many metrics that you can use, but just think about what your turnover rate is. Then, if you were going to have conversation with those A players, hopefully there's an A player on that team that you're thinking about, what do you think they're telling you about why they're staying with your organization? Then, how is the manager letting those A players in that team know that they are recognized? And going for lunch with the manager is not necessarily a recognition. Just because you like to go to Cactus Club doesn't mean that your employee wants to go to Cactus Club. And furthermore, may not even want to go with you. So you want to think about the recognition that you're giving. And the reason I bring that up is because a number of presidents have been taught in school that you need to recognize your senior players. And one way of recognizing is food. So therefore, you always have to take your A players for lunch, for breakfast, for supper. Maybe not. Maybe it's giving them a gift card at their restaurant they like to go to with their family. That could be another way of handling the food situation. And then on the back, I've asked you to focus a little bit on that same team. How are they sharing leadership? How do they handle change? And how are they getting the work done that's expected of them? And lastly, what attributes do they have that are needed in your particular organization? Because every organization is a little different. So I want to give you some time to do some thinking, and then we'll do some discussing at the table. So let's reconvene in about 10 minutes, okay? What ahas do you have? You may not have even got to the point of working through the case study, but it's fantastic that you're having conversation, that you're thinking. So what ahas do you have? What are you going to walk away from regarding a leadership strategy to help retain your top talent? Because that was the point of the conversation this morning. What are you going to do? Yeah.
I tend
Terrible at this.
Just as it was mentioned in the trades, I tend to mention things that haven't gone right, and I'm afraid that people might relax if I start saying how great they're doing in all these areas, whereas I think maybe on second thought, I should give more, hey, you are doing a good job, even though you think everybody knows they are. I haven't actually said it.
Right.
And then rewarding in a way that might be a little like a Tim card or something.
And if you can recognize and reward as quickly after it happened,
Or Wendy's, yeah. Sorry.
that reinforces it, because you don't want them thinking, what did I do right? I just got a Tim's card. What did I do? Oh, I showed up today. Oh, fantastic. That's not quite what you're rewarding. So try and have that recognition as quickly as possible after the event that occurred. Okay? Good. What did you learn? If you can just speak into the mic, that would be great. I just want to know one thing you're going to walk away with about how you might lead a little differently in retaining your staff.
Well, and I think as well, because we're a new group, we're just getting together, so we need to sit down and bounce some ideas off of each other and work towards working as a team a little bit more, because right now we're so independent and individual.
Yes.
And we got to get everybody on board, and especially the front staff as well too. And I need to delegate some of my tasks to the other people as well.
Yeah, can't do everything.
No.
No.
I think just thinking on that shared leadership piece also, it flips it around into that servant leadership piece. When you're always sharing vision, engaging them in it, and it's not that top down all the time. It's how are we going to do this together, and then being a part of that. So that's passing on tasks, involving people, but also making sure if you're the CEO or whatever you are, if you're not the one emptying the garbage every now and then, you're not doing yourself any favors either.
Yeah, you got to get the broom and brush it once in a while. You can't just always be telling people what to do, okay? The other thing is, what do you do when you make a mistake? Do you get into your office and hide? Do you tell people that you made a mistake? Do you brainstorm about what you could do about it? Share it with them, because you're not perfect either. It's okay. Right. Anything?
Well, we talk about generative thought, and that's the taking the time to do that, and especially one of the things that we tend to be outward focused versus inward focused in terms of the teams. I.e., for example, Jim says sales. Well, I'm in sales as well, but the issue is the first sales you are is your team members.
Yeah.
And having that understanding sometimes is difficult. Like one of the things that we've done in some of past organizations is done DISC assessments.
Yes.
So that people understand what each person's drivers are.
Yeah.
And that tends to help develop that HR process in a smaller organization.
And to build on that, if you do have a team you've walked into, it's a whole different type of leadership than if you've hired everybody. So if you're walking in to a team, they've all been hired and you're the new person, you're going to have to prove to them that you know what you're talking about. There is a bit of that. You've got to build their trust because you know. If you don't know, be honest with them. Get the help from them. This table, what are you going to do?
Well, when I was going through this, I saw, I marked down people need to be professional, kindness, respect. We've got a few employees at the moment that aren't in that zone, and I don't think they'll ever get in that zone. So the next phase is to have those discussions of what are we doing with this problem. Yep. And if one person causes 5 other people to be upset every single day, then there's an issue. So anyways, it's one of those things that's been mulling through my head for quite a while. And I've talked to certain people about situations and how we can resolve some of this stuff. So
and you know what, those things never go away.
No, they don't.
You can't put them under a rock and hope that they'll go away if you just ignore it, because they won't. They'll surface and they'll bubble in other ways. So you're absolutely right. You need to start thinking about what are we going to do if one person disrupts 5 others on a daily basis. That's a lot of disruption in your organization. And others are watching. Your other employees are watching that one problem and seeing that nothing is happening. So then what happens? They'll start assuming some of those behaviors as well.
Yeah, and we recently had that situation as well in one of our crews, and we had one long-term employee that was perpetually being late, perpetually not showing up for work. It got so crazy, even the start of this year, person was gone 13 days already, and we were only like 2 months into the season, and it's like, are you kidding me? So we had to make some changes pretty quick, and the previous year was even worse than that. But it sent a message to all the other people in the entire organization that, we're not doing this anymore. Right. And so it's actually worked out really well since that time. It's difficult. And we've hired people in place that are heads and shoulders above the person we let go. Yeah. It's difficult while you're working into that. So those of you that are new managers, that's hard, what he's talking about. But once you've done it, and you're on the other side of it, then you'll see, wow, we should have done that earlier. And the first time you do it is difficult. The next time is not as difficult. It will always be difficult when you're dealing with people. We're emotional. It's going to be that way. Okay? What about yourself as a new person in the organization?
Well, actually, me and Pat worked together.
Yeah.
So we were kind of talking about the exact same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any ideas at your table?
When we started, or I started looking at this, we got into a little bit of conversation. Dwayne and I are partners, and I guess what we came up with is our visions. Everybody has a vision that is their own, and you can have a general one, but if your vision warps or distorts the general direction, it can create issues, and that confusion goes right to the teams and things like that. So we just talked about where we want to take things, and I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but
absolutely you are.
It led to some good discussion.
Good, and you want to think, who are those people that can help drive that?
Yeah.
Not everybody will. So think about not always having the leadership team driving the change. There will be other leaders in your organization that you can call on if you bring them into the mix, and that's developing your people.
Yeah, and that's what we came up with, that, our vision is ours, but what is theirs, and how do we involve them? And that's getting that feedback and that communications is going to be vital.
And there's a lot of discussion that happens at the water cooler. You might not think that they talk to each other, but they do. So if someone has a skewed perception of the vision, and they're talking to somebody else, and maybe it's a junior person who just started, they might believe that individual. Then where does it take your vision after that? So, good. Any last questions before we leave this topic? We could spend a week on this. We spent 90 minutes. So, yeah.
This is sort of a basic question about tardiness. What if you have an A player that's doing everything very well, but just can't come in the door on time, and it sends a message to everybody else that says, this job's not important. They're doing a good job, but they just can't come in, and you have talks in the back of the warehouse, you have more discussions. Let's say you're going to bring in a thumb scanner or a retina scanner, something like that. How do you encourage that kind of behavior to go away or to start doing right?
A couple of things to think about. So you've got one problem employee who's tardy. They are an A player, but they're tardy. How can you discipline that one person and not affect everybody else? What is something that motivates that person that you might take away? And it could be, absolutely it could be a bonus. Absolutely it could be money. We pay you to be here at 8. You're showing up at 8:10. 8:10 times, that's 10 minutes, times 5 days a week, times 52 weeks of the year. That's a lot of money. So we're going to have a conversation about that. We're going to pay you from the time you walk in the door. So talk to them about a recognition that they relate to and draw on that. A lot of organizations bring in new policies, new standards, new ideas to try and fix only one person. Try and stay away from that. Just focus on that one person and what are we going to do about this? So that's one idea. There's many, but that might be something that you want. Now, whole different thing if they don't work in the same location you do.
That's the issue.
Okay, so they work in a different location.
Yeah, I don't see it all the time. I look at the camera in the morning.
Or hear about it. Others will start to tell you. Because what's going to happen is pretty soon everybody's going to be showing up 10 minutes late, or wanting to leave 10 minutes early, or wanting to leave 10 minutes early at lunch or something. It's going to have some effect in the organization. Yeah, location, if it's not on the same premises as yours, it's a little bit more difficult to address, but you've got to have conversation. And there has to be a point where you stop talking. There's got to be a repercussion. This is what's going to happen, because this is not acceptable behavior. And you know what? They're not an A player. They're A minus. A means in technical and in behavior. It doesn't mean only technical. Yeah, they're an A minus, and you let them know that. Sure. Oh, yeah, sorry. Remind me of that.
In today's environment, you find yourself having to you may have an A player where you have to modify your policies to work with it, because if they are an A player, and they have a different work schedule because of a kid or something.
Exactly.
In today's environment of HR policy, if you're not allowing for that, then realistically, those policies you have to look at and say, okay, if you are producing what anyone else will do, and you're still working the 8 hours that you're mandated to do, modified work days. We've had to do that in our organization.
Yeah.
It's difficult to do, but sending the message across the organization of that flexibility, and it can be a very positive thing for certain individuals, but it's that multi-generational aspect of the workforce that is that we all struggle with in certain age groups.
The other thing is that you've got people who are dealing more with seniors, so aging parents. So you may find that they've got to go to appointments with their aging parents. And it's in the middle of the day when work has to happen. And so you've got to be able to adjust in some way. Saying no to people, you may lose someone, which is the point that he's making. So you have to look at your workforce. Now, if you only got one good player in that whole team, it's a problem. That's why you want to develop the team. So those of you that are new to the role of leadership, that's something you certainly want to think about. No is not the first thing out of your mouth, but you do want to set some standards. Otherwise, they'll take advantage of you. Any other questions before we leave this topic? No? Okay, so going to give you a break. We'll reconvene. What time are we supposed to start the next one? Or 11:40? 10:45. Okay, let me give you 5 minutes till we can at least change the slide deck and let you walk around a little bit, and then we'll reconvene.